The future of orthodontics is evolving and changing every day. But although the way to achieve practice growth has changed, there's never been a better time to be an orthodontist. Let's get into the minds of industry leaders, forward-thinking orthodontists, and technology insiders to learn how they see the future of the orthodontic specialty. How will digital orthodontics, artificial intelligence, clear aligner therapy, remote monitoring, in-house printing, and other innovations change the way you practice? Join your hosts Dr. Lyon Klempner and Amy Epstein each month as they bring you insights, tips, and guest interviews focused on helping you capitalize on the opportunities for practice growth. And now, welcome to the Golden Age of Orthodontics with the co-founders of People and Practice, Dr. Lyon Klempner and Amy Epstein.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dr. Lyon Klempner, retired orthodontist and the CEO of People and Practice. I'm here with my co-host, daughter, People in Practice partner, and the marketing guru, Amy Epstein.
Thank you, Dad, for that kind introduction. And for those that don't know, he and I joined up about 11 years ago now to start up People in Practice, which is a marketing firm for orthodontists.
Why can't I get an introduction like that once in a while?
Oh yeah, I just like don't. People know who you are. You need no introduction. You need no introduction. How about that?
All right.
Is that a good save?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if my mother were alive, she'd be quite upset.
She'd be disappointed. If your mother were alive, the intro would be very different, though.
It would just be me.
Here's Leon, my tall, handsome, smartest person. My son.
Well, you were close second, I have to say. So, what can I say? Anyway, it has been a wild ride with this podcast. We've been doing it a long time now, and we're about to start our fourth year, believe it or not. We've had about 40,000 downloads. Yeah, 40,000 downloads. And if you're new to the podcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you can not miss any.
It does seem like it was yesterday we bought these fancy microphones and wondered if anybody would actually listen to us.
Well, we've been lucky enough to have some really great guests on the show. So we thought it would be useful to share some of the highlights with you on this episode. So if you hear something you find interesting, you can actually download and listen to the entire 30 to 40 minute or so episode on our website, pplpractice.com/podcast, or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you consume your podcast data.
We've been lucky enough to have some really great guests, like you said. It was hard to narrow it down to a couple of highlights, but we're going to share today some content from episodes where we've had as our guest Chris Bentson of Bentson and Koppel, Suzanne Wilson, formerly of Gage and now with Dental Monitoring, Dr. Skye Naslenas, Wes Lyon of McGill & Lyon, and everyone's favorite TikToker, ortho attorney Trey Lawrence.
So let's get started. In episode 33, we asked one of my favorite guys, Chris Bentson, about what's the future of orthodontics look like from his perspective, and what is his thoughts about the digital technology that's taking place. He shared his observations of key players in the industry and where they're focusing their investments, but let Chris tell you.
If I look over the last, 24 months, where has the money flowed? You kind of look and you start with Align. It's got a market cap, depending on when you catch the stock, at around $55 billion. Sometimes it's below that, sometimes it's above, but it's just they're the biggest ones in ortho, and they're only 26 years old. So, just a great strength there. Then you just kind of rattle down through some really quality companies. Straumann Group that provides a lot of services in dental and ortho. owns ClearCorrect. They bought a company called DR Smile a year ago. That's like a direct-to-consumer company. You look at Ormco, which was a kind of a bastion of markets or brackets for really years. It was the who's who, the Polo Club, the cool kids. They're really putting all their investment dollars into their aligner right now, called Spark, and Insignia, which was an incredibly awesome idea, is really kind of shelved right now. The Damon bracket still exists, but I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of more of R&D dollars chasing that. You look at Rocky Mountain last year; they were bought by Ortho America Holdings. It's really, they had 24 or so reps in the United States. Now they have single digits. They're taking that product and its whole suite of the Rocky Mountain products down to South America. So that was that play. You look at Dentsply Sirona, they got totally out of the bracket business, made some pretty brash statements and said the future is aligners, period. And then they spent $1 billion in cash and bought a company called Byte, another direct-to-consumer company. You look at Lightforce, they raised $50 million. This is a mass digitized, customized, bracket, indirect bonded. That's the future of the bracket world. You look at Embrace on the West Coast. John Pham and his group raised another $102 million last year in Series D financing, on top of $70 million that they had before. So that's going to make a splash in orthodontics over time. You just got to believe. Dental Monitoring, a French company, just raised very quickly $150 million and has a valuation of $1 billion for virtual monitoring, another digital play. You got ULab that just raised $54.5 million in Series E financing, a digital play. You got KLO and Braces with a product called Stride that's a lighter version of Lightforce, I guess you'd say, and they're going to be chasing some money. So all this tells me that there's not going to be a lot of R&D dollars spent by the big bracket companies on brackets anymore. It's all going into aligners. It's going into digital workflow. It's going into digital printing. And the future of orthodontics is going to be digital. That means a lot of things, mostly lab fees. So we got to reorganize our P&L, and it means changes in digital workflow, which means we have to deploy people differently in order to have high quality of life. So long answer, Leon, but a lot of money flowing into digital. That's the future. It's going to take 9 years more to get more serious about that, but that's where I'd be headed strategically with my practice right now, is understanding and getting into the digital space deep, because if you wait 5 more years, it's going to be a steep hill to climb.
Chris goes on to respond to a caller question asking about the implementation of technology to increase profitability and enhance capacity for growth. He shares his recommendations about how to rework the team that you already have in place in order to support new technology that's integrated into your practice. And it seems the key, without giving too much away, is enabling and empowering them to free up doctor time.
As far as remote monitoring and everything, that's the future. You've got to retool your team. When you say, and talk to doctors, where's the pain in this digital environment? It's in, I got to spend all my time behind a computer. And so we've got to deploy our team members so that they can help us spend less time behind the computer. And that means more virtual appointments. So we have more time in the office to do these things. And that means also training assistants for whatever system we use for aligners or mass digital customized braces to get those cases set up so that we just are kind of checking it off and tweaking versus doing the entire job all on the doctor's time.
Chris goes into more detail here about how to harness the skill, experience, and relationships of the assistants that many of you have in your offices, putting them front and center, and even deploying them as what he called orthodontic PAs, similar to what medical doctors have, these physician assistants. Here's what he has to say.
You really introduced me, Leon, to dental monitoring. You said, hey, you need to take a look at this product, this company, what it does. And I have, and just my personal experience is, I haven't been happy with my smile. I had braces as a teenager. I'm 60 years old. My teeth have moved. I just got scanned by David Sharver in Birmingham. I live in Greensboro. We're going to do Invisalign. I'm going to have dental monitoring monitor the case. This is going to be, for me, a bit of a case study for how to speak about, this digital movement personally from the podium, because I think we're going to be able to manage my case with 2 or 3 visits where I get some nice dinners with David, and that's it. And, fortunately, I can do that. But, can you do that with people in town? Heck yeah. And we're seeing this over and over. So I totally agree. And this whole idea of your staff in medicine and the parallels, the term I'm using for orthodontists is turn some of your staff into PAs. Like we have in medicine, because every practice I work with says, this person right here has been with me for 20 years. They think like I do. They could be an orthodontist. If they're just amazing, and so forth. That's a skill set that can be turned into a PA, that can be a virtual assistant for you and really save you tons of time. That's where we're headed. That's where orthodontics is going. I see it very clearly. A lot of people don't want to be there because they don't have to be there because they're so busy right now. But we're going to go back to a tighter market, and in order to get some of this incredible fun growth that you've experienced in 2021, you have to do some things differently. And, I think first guy over the hill, takes a lot of arrows in the chest. You don't have to be the first guy of the hill anymore. There's a lot of evidence that says, hey, this works. You're not going to get, burned or cut or bleed a lot. You got to learn some things, but you got to be willing to change. And I think it could be a lot of fun.
Another of my favorite episodes is when we spoke to Suzanne Wilson, then Chief Marketing Officer of Gage, about the value per visit metric. We hear it a lot, and it was good to hear from her about that particular metric, because Gage collects and interprets a lot of data around it. I love numbers. This particular key performance indicator was interesting to understand what it means for a practice. Here's what she has to say.
The value per visit is so important, because when we think about what we are doing every day, we have a capacity, right? We can only see so many patients. We only have so many chairs, so much staff, so on and so forth. So understanding what our costs are and what our production is an essential business metric. So that value per visit really helps us understand, am I doing well? Do I need to look at some different systems? Maybe I need to do more aligners, or maybe I want to look at a different kind of bracket system. You had mentioned Lightforce, or maybe it's, Ormco or others, or using 3M, whatever it may be. Understanding what's really going on as far as our performance in the clinic is essential to decision making.
Speaking of looking into new treatment modalities and technologies, in a recent episode, we asked Skye Naslenas, based in Toronto, why she moved away from Invisalign as her aligner company.
So I think ULAB has done several things right that I recognize in a company that is truly going to be in a partnership with orthodontists. So the attractive feature is that they offer ULAB services, ULAB aligners, exclusively to orthodontists. We all, as a profession, had a bit of a gripe that Invisalign marketed firstly to the general dentist before they marketed to the orthodontist. So there was a big difference in there. I felt like I would be offering an exclusive product to our profession. ULAB management team, developers actively listened to orthodontists and their gripes about the leading brand shortcomings. So when they launched their product onto the market, it addressed all of the shortcomings that the leading brand had, as voiced by multiple times by orthodontists. So it's almost like patient going for a second opinion. So they tell you exactly what they didn't like about the first opinion. So it's very easy to fall into favor as a second opinion. Well, of course, you're going to ameliorate everything else that the other provider didn't do. So I feel like ULab capitalized on all the shortcomings that were pointed out by over a couple of decades of treating orthodontists, and they've put that into action, and they've addressed our concerns, such as we are the technicians. We're not limited by tooth movement and any algorithms. We can overwrite artificial intelligence and the algorithms that are set out as the baseline, which is great. But also, I don't have to communicate over somebody who has less knowledge perhaps in areas of tooth movement in order to execute the movements that I want. So the process of case setup became very easy, very dynamic, and under my full control.
In episode 4, we had Wes Lyon of McGill & Lyon share his thoughts on selling your practice to an OSO or a DSO and what factors to consider. Spoiler alert, it's not about the money upfront, it's about the return. Here's Wes.
Wes, tell me, is it always a good deal for an ortho to sell?
No, that couldn't be further from the truth. So think back to one of the first things I said, which is an orthodontic practice has historically sold for 4 to 5 times earnings. Those numbers have jumped up with the entrance of private equity. We're starting to see 6, 7. I've seen some go as high as 9 or 10 times earnings, which is fantastic. But they hand you this pile of money. And now all of a sudden you have to turn around and you have to find a place to put this money that's going to generate as high of a return as your orthodontic practice was. And many times they're trying to convince you that this is a great deal because they want the profits that they can't find elsewhere. So you have to think there is a reason that these people want to buy your practice. It's a very good reason. It's also the reason one of the most rewarding things you can do is own a practice. So the check is not a good reason to sell.
We also spoke with Trey Lawrence, General Counsel of the AAO, who discussed how to best position yourself if a lawsuit comes up after retreating a direct-to-consumer case. In a nutshell, it's a combination of documentation, informed consent, and expectation management. Listen to him explain exactly what he means in this clip.
Ultimately, I think, first of all, the most important consideration is ultimately you got to use your own discretion. You got to use your own judgment. Am I comfortable taking this case? What's the treatment that this patient apparently received previously? What is the harm that they experienced? Do I feel like I still have an acceptable chance of providing a successful treatment outcome for this patient? And if the answer to that question is yes, then you move forward. So then how do you move forward? Well, again, the consideration that you're trying to keep in mind here is you only want to be responsible legally for anything that results from the treatment you provided, not from treatment that somebody else provided. The good news is that the law agrees with you in that. The law is only going to hold you responsible for harm that is proximately caused by treatment that you provide. It's not going to hold you responsible legally for harm that was proximately caused by treatment that somebody else or another company provided. The challenge is going to be demonstrating that to the decision maker, to the court, to a dental board. So how do you do that? The first big step, and probably the most important step on doing that, is what another AAO member, Dr. Dalian Featheringham, I have to give her credit for this phrase, but she coined it as immaculate documentation. And so that basically means whatever possible records you can take when you first see that patient before you decide to move forward with treatment, every possible imaging that you can do, photographs, all of that, you want to make sure that you have as thorough of a record as possible to document the condition that the patient was in when they came to see you, and to document as much as you can anything that the patient has experienced or any condition that they currently have that's a result of that former treatment. So immaculate documentation, do everything you possibly can to record the condition that you're in. Because all of that's going to be crucial if you have to demonstrate to a jury or to a dental board that the harm that the patient's complaining of is harm that resulted from prior treatment and then not from the treatment that you're providing. So a second big step is going to be the informed consent process. This is obviously, it's always an important part of any kind of treatment, but it is particularly important in these situations. So first of all, right out of the gate on that, I want to hammer on a phrase that we use all the time at the AO legal department. That's informed consent as a process and not a form. Because I know in the ordinary course of routine treatment, it can become very easy to let that informed consent just become another piece of paperwork that you have your staff help you to get the patient to fill out, with all these other forms they're completing and just kind of shuffle it through. It's really not intended to be that, even in normal cases. It's really intended to be an interaction between the doctor and the patient where the patient is informed of the risk of their treatment, possible side effects, and then the benefits of their treatment. And then based on all that, they make the decision to move forward. So that is especially important in these cases where a patient's treated with a direct-to-consumer company and maybe didn't get care that met the standard of care, or possibly experience some actual harm from it, because you really got to make sure that the patient is clear in their understanding of maybe what conditions they're bringing into the treatment. If they've experienced some kind of a harm from this direct-to-consumer treatment. Or secondly, you also need to make sure that the patient has reasonable expectations about what it is or isn't possible to do through treatment, because it may be, in fact, be the case that because of something that was done previously, you may not be able to get 100% of the results that you would ordinarily get in that kind of case. Maybe you can only get them 80 or 90% of the way there. And so you want to make sure that the patient is clear and understanding that, and then makes a decision to move forward to treat with you based on that understanding. And so that's where that informed consent form is really a crucial piece of that process, to make sure that you've documented all of that you've got all that information there, the patient acknowledges it and signs it. And then finally, when we talk about these things, we say this in the law all the time about lots of things that are not limited just to dentistry or orthodontic practice, but there's no way to 100% guarantee you can't be sued. I mean, people can still sue you. What you're really looking to do is minimize your legal risk in case you are sued, and then minimize or maximize your chances of prevailing on that claim if you are sued. And so that's where all of these things come in. There's no magic step, unfortunately, that I can give orthodontists that say, treat one of these cases and do this, and you have a 100% chance of not getting sued. But hopefully through documentation, through a very energetic and robust informed consent process, and making sure the patient's clear on what they expect and knowing where they are when they come in, you can hopefully minimize the chance of getting sued, and then certainly put your best case forward if you are sued or you do get a dental board complaint in that situation.
Thanks for listening in today. We continue to bring you the most informative guests discussing topics that we feel are important to you. If you find our podcast useful, share it with a colleague. We'd really appreciate it. You can find all of our podcasts on Apple, SoundCloud, Spotify, or on our website, pplpractice.com/podcasts. So we've been talking today about highlights from last year, but this year is shaping up to be very exciting as well.
It is. Should we tell them?
Well, to tell you the truth, we might not be able to keep it a secret much longer.
Okay. So we will tease the fact that we are starting up a brand new podcast, this one focusing on team members in a practice specifically. And we're bringing on an additional host to help with that podcast. So we're very excited to be launching that in the next few months. So please stay tuned to this podcast and we'll give you all the details. Thanks for listening to the Golden Age of Orthodontics podcast. We look forward to delivering some useful and insightful, informative content to you again next month. And remember, for forward-thinking orthos, the Golden Age of Orthodontics is ahead. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden Age of Orthodontics. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit our website at thegoldenageoforthodontics.com for direct links to both the audio and video versions of this episode.